Your Excellency, we heard the President just give passionate remarks about how Congo is open for business and is open particularly for investments. So in line with that, could you speak a bit about some of the synergies and opportunities you see between Congo and the UAE? Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President, for those excellent remarks and for everybody present here, and in particular, His Highness Sheikh Hamdan and all other delegates from all around the world who are joining us at this Africa Global Business Forum. Indeed, the African continent has been witnessing tremendous growth in the last few years. By way of context, if you look at their contribution to global trade has shifted from about 2% in 2013 to what is expected to be almost 12% in the next 2 decades. More specifically, intra-Africa trade is going to continue to increase almost to 50% in the next few decades as well. And so when the UAE looks at this, they look at tremendous opportunity. But I must emphasize, and this is also applicable to the DRC, we're not only looking at business connections, we're also looking at people connections. Because everything must start first and foremost through human interaction, human respect, dignity, collaboration, cooperation. And I've had the honor and the privilege of working on the continent for a number of years, and I can say with full confidence that those personal relationships over the years have taught me and my team quite a bit. And so as we look to the future, and His Excellency the President mentioned the importance of a transfer of knowledge. We look at opportunities in the DRC, whether it's in infrastructure or agribusiness or digitization or port management and port development, as well as the mining industry, all through the context of how do we create a situation, an outcome that benefits families, communities, and enterprise. And so as we discussed briefly before, the gagnant-gagnant or the win-win approach is something that sits at the heart of our overall development and business approach. And it is also why every African nation is today represented in the Expo, because it speaks to the philosophy of this city, of this country, which is we look for joint opportunities that bring value, and joint opportunities that bring value over a considerable amount of time. As I listen and as I continue to learn, my colleagues and I continue to be admirers of what is happening, but also staunch supporters of the development plan that Africans themselves have designed for themselves. And I think the Expo story is a very clear one where you can see their own national history, their own national objective, and their own dreams come to be in the exhibitions that they've put forward. And so I am honored with the opportunity to share the stage with His Excellency the President and with all of you today to really try and articulate that the message for us is very much on the business side, but at the heart of that there is a people side and there's a human side. And the more we get to know each other on that equal footing and equal platform, then that's the way long-lasting relationships are built and the way long-lasting relationships also survive, and more importantly, they thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Your Excellency, Monsieur le Président, earlier this year, we had the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which has created the largest free trade area in the world. With that, what are some of the most promising areas you see, given that for, whether it's for investors or for the private sector in Congo?
Bien, merci, monsieur. Je dirais ici pour commencer que la zone de libre-échange est un grand défi que les Africains se sont lancés, celui de créer un vaste marché de plus d'1 milliard d'habitants. Et ce défi, on le réalisera par l'intégration du continent. Une intégration que nous voulons d'abord par des mesures politiques et économiques, comme les barrières douanières qu'il faut abattre et, on va dire, unifier ce marché, mais également un défi au niveau des infrastructures pour réussir l'intégration continentale. Parce que l'une des faiblesses de notre continent, c'est cette incapacité à pouvoir communiquer entre ces pays qui regorgent pourtant de beaucoup de potentialités. Et la République démocratique du Congo, qui est un vaste pays, a aussi, parmi ses challenges, la réalisation de cette intégration nationale. Nous avons 9 voisins au cœur de l'Afrique, ce qui fait que notre position géographique nous permet d'être à la fois dans les communautés économiques d'Afrique centrale, d'Afrique de l'Est et d'Afrique australe. Cela nous positionne donc comme un pays stratégique qui doit absolument développer des infrastructures pour que l'Afrique puisse en profiter et se développer également. Et donc, ce sont d'énormes opportunités, pour revenir à votre question, ce sont des énormes opportunités que nous offrons et qui pourraient évidemment nous permettre d'aller de l'avant, de développer notre pays et au-delà notre continent.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Following up on that, Your Excellency, could you speak a bit about how the UAE is seeing the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and what opportunities you see on the basis of that? Earlier on today, His Excellency Hamad Bouamim had spoken about the increased trade that's happening between the UAE and the African continent. But if you can speak a bit to how specifically the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is going to impact that trade and how you are strategically looking at that.
So certainly His Excellency Hamad flagged it, but also His Excellency Sultan bin Sulayem spoke about how the increased footprint of the transportation of goods in record time across the intra-African trade platform is going to be tremendously useful for market access. We're very proud of DP World as well as Emirates Airlines and all of the different national companies that have opened new opportunities and also that have created good employment and strong skill building in the countries of the South, not only in the African continent, but also if you look at Asia and South America as well. As I mentioned earlier, we are foreseeing that intra-Africa trade to grow to almost 50% in the next 2 decades from its current 12%, which means more purchasing power for the citizens of these nations. Digitization will become a very active sector that we're looking at investing in because it just eases the flow, especially if you have more and more access to not just the market, but also to digital platforms. We continue to strongly believe that the consumer is becoming more savvy and also more wired in, if you will, in ensuring that his goods and services can reach the end destination. If you look at how digitization has worked for farmers, for example, and how it's also been able to cut through any middle player, you'll also see that that larger and more direct impact has been quite strong. And so from our standpoint, we look at this with much promise, and we also look at it with a serious level of investment. And like His Excellency the President mentioned, the infrastructure is going to be key, and we're ready to go ahead in that footprint. but also sessions like this that bring the business community together and introduces and further strengthens those business engagements, not just Emirati, but also from all around the world who use Dubai as their base to explore the continent, and vice versa. The continent continues to see us as a base for them when they look at exploring the rest of the world. And that's a privilege we take very seriously, and also one that we're very honored by. I hope that responds to your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. But to follow up on that, one of the themes you spoke about was digitization. And if, the UAE has been a leader in that space. I know we were all excited, for example, when we heard about some of the strategic policies around artificial intelligence, right? So speaking on that specifically, His Excellency the President has spoken about infrastructure and energy and some of those sectors, but we know that the digital economy is growing very rapidly. We're starting to see unicorns emerging out of the continent. This year alone, we've already had both Andela and Flutterwave, who are now worth over $1 billion. How are you thinking about digitization in the UAE Africa economic partnership? What role will digitization play, and how is the UAE specifically trying to help drive that digital economy on the continent?
So I would say we do it certainly through the prism of partnership. And there are enough hubs within the continent for us not to try and reinvent the wheel, but certainly for us to build on what currently exists. If it's on an individual level, the UAE is very committed to identifying and supporting those unicorns. I'll give a quick example. On the Expo platform, we've supported 24 global innovators from the continent who've offered fantastic solutions that are scalable, that can support health, education, and the overall environment. In fact, one of our finalists, actually one of our winners is a Kenyan-based company called Sanergy, and they're also a finalist for the Earthshot Prize by His Highness Prince William. And so there are a lot of commitments that we have from an individual standpoint. However, if you take that from an institutional standpoint, and really that's what you need because you're trying to also scale, we really look at how we can work with enterprise that are already very strong in the continent, that have strong legs, if you will, that need that extra momentum and push. And today, mobile penetration in the continent is quite high, and that gives you an immediate platform to be able to reach out primarily from the enterprise level. From a government G2G level, as you mentioned, artificial intelligence, we have a minister for artificial intelligence, but the UAE started this track almost 2 decades ago, if not further. And that really is about creating services for the end consumer all in one platform, whether it's paying your bills or having your license and your passport documentation all on one platform. We've already begun many conversations with different government entities who are interested in deploying these tools, because that's actually the necessary layer as well. And so I think across the board, the digitization train is coming our way, and it's really a question of whether or not we decide to hop on it and learn how to use it, because technology can be an incredible enabler as well.
Thank you so much for that. So, I mean, that was, to me, what was really powerful is this prism of partnership, where it's not just about a one-way transfer, but it's a way in which both the African continents and the UAE can learn from each other. We've obviously learned about the importance of digitization. His Excellency the President spoke about the modernization of the economy and his focus on that modernization and the pillars of that: infrastructure, energy, reforming the business environment to make Congo conducive for business and to promote trade. We've spoken about the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and ways in which that can also help to facilitate the socio-economic transformation. And ultimately, as the President has emphasized, Congo is open for business and is open for investment. And we're hopeful that this will start to catalyze some of that, since we have so many different stakeholders involved here at this forum. So at this point, I would love to ask you all to join me in thanking their excellencies for sharing these great remarks with us. and for giving us so much food for thought.
Merci.